The podcast, love to dig into that. So it's obviously had incredible success. Number one spot, I think, in the arts and fashion and beauty podcast charts in Australia. Is that right?
It's been number one many times, consistently highly ranked in the Australian podcast charts and globally across a lot of other podcast charts as well.
Yeah, and huge download numbers. So what was the genesis of the podcast and how important has it been as part of your overall marketing strategy?
Yeah, look, I think the genesis was that organic extension of our brand. When we were talking about when we decided to do brand, part of it was also because I think as a combined team, we're kind of proud of our different approach to beauty. And so there was this excitement about conveying that different approach. And so the same goes here, I think. It was podcast is a different media format. It's almost the antithesis of Instagram. Instagram is aesthetic and managed and ordered and relatively surface. Podcast requires you, there's no pictures, requires you to talk, and it values authenticity. There's a lot of same thing that happened on Instagram around influencers and being authentic. When that happens on podcast, if you're authentic with your words, it's actually much deeper than being authentic with your picture. You know, that's actually arguable, but there is naturally more depth in a 30-minute conversation than there is in a single photo.
Given you're data-driven, how do you measure the return on investment, or how are you tying it back to brand metrics and consideration through the funnel?
Yeah, so I think there's a number. When we started out, the intention was to communicate that authenticity, that democratic approach to beauty, and loosely grow an audience. And so going to your metrics point, I think there was a couple of critical things. One is we chose two hosts for the first program. There's been subsequently quite a few other podcasts, but for the first program, we chose two hosts. And one of those hosts was quite an expert in beauty and skincare. And the other host was probably the opposite of that, sort of a newbie to beauty. I wanted that combination of hosts because one could disrupt the other. Hannah would ask Joe questions around, hey, what does that acronym mean? And, you know, really, is that important? So that the conversation became about the 360-degree conversation that actually anyone that chats about beauty, and let's just say the women in our audience, when they're talking about beauty, that conversation is not limited to beauty products, aspirational looks. It's a wide-ranging, free-ranging conversation that's often hilarious. It covers things that weren't mentioned. You know, the unglamorous side of beauty, the awkward or funny or gross side of beauty. And I think that people who love beauty love all those bits as well. And so it was an opportunity for us to have that wider conversation. And our audience loved it. We sort of, you know, because we measure these things, we can almost see that when we talk about stuff that isn't normally talked about, there is instant engagement. When we talk about stuff that in particular beauty retailers don't usually talk about, so other retailers' products, there is instant engagement. And that's because I think some of those things indicate trust. So that's what set the sort of loose goals. It was this, hey, let's have an honest conversation. Let's sort of do things that aren't being done elsewhere, and let's build an audience. And that was kind of flowing from that, hey, you know, we started out going, well, how should we express our brands and what is profitable will help us grow our business? That's where we started at. We moved to what are customers engaged with. And then I think that expressed itself in the podcast around what grows an audience, what will hold people. And that's much more of a media focus, right? So we started looking at things like consumption of the podcast. How long are people listening? In the first 5 minutes, what's the drop-off rate? How do we change that around? What impact does different subjects or topics have? All that stuff we measured. And then tied back to the business, there's been a lot of things that we've used, tried, some of them discarded, other ones we continue to use. Things like the products we mentioned. We've done some sort of unique offers for our podcast listeners. And also, obviously, there's lots of links and so on Apple, but also on Spotify, on the different places that people can listen to us. There's links at which can look at data from that and understand, you know, what kind of value is flowing back to the business. I think that the important thing was that we made this decision around, hey, we want to grow the audience. We know there's value. Intuitively, we know it's right. We will sort of expect and ask to have a measurable element here so that we have some reassurance that this investment is working. But we also focus on growing media, growing our audience and growing their engagement and getting to be better at that engagement point.
You've been listening to Lean Mean Marketing Teams with Ty Hayes. If you love the show, please remember to hit subscribe so that you can discover more tips and strategies to build a high-performance marketing team. And if you're feeling generous, please tell someone about the show who you think would benefit. We're on a mission to help CMOs build their dream team and enable marketers to do their best work. And we appreciate your help in spreading the word.